Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Hey, guys. Um, man, did I make a small, kind of huge mistake? I was just caught up, guys. I've been doing a recording for a Nightblade build, DPS build that's going to be coming out, and I just honestly I completely lost track of time. I'm sorry, I'm starting like 20 minutes late. But today, right now, what we're doing is we're working on a Warden build, and I've actually kind of narrowed it down to going to be a Brittleden build. For those who don't know, a little while ago, hey, what's up, Zombie Jesus? Hold on, let me read this comment. Zombie Jesus says a Frost Warden, interesting. I made a Frost Necro with all the fun scribing, really fun. Might be taking some notes on sets to use. Awesome, that's cool, Zombie. Yeah, so the whole reason that I'm doing this, guys, is because a little while ago I put out to the channel members and I asked them like, hey. I only have, like a little bit less than 10 channel members. And for those who don't know what a channel member is on YouTube, if you choose, it's kind of like subbing on Twitch, right? If you pay monthly, you can do it for 1 month or keep going. Starts at $1 a month and goes up from there. I don't have a whole lot of perks for my channel members. It's really people that just want to support what I do here. And, one of the things I want to do is just like, hey, if you're a channel member, it doesn't matter if you're at a higher tier or lower tier. I treat all the tiers the same. I was like, if you want a build, you know, put it out there. Ask me what you want. And actually I'll pull it up real quick so that let me see how I should be able to sort by channel members, I thought. Channel members too also like they're YouTube like separates their comments out and stuff like that. It makes it a little bit easier for me to see everything because sometimes I can miss comments, but I put it out there. I believe Weremoogle asked for a DK healer, so we'll be doing that in the near future. And oh my gosh, so many comments. Is there not a way to sort? I'm almost positive there is. I just can't seem to find it. Uh, let me see. Well, anyways, the other one that was asked for was a warden, and specifically a Magicka warden. And I put a little bit of thought into it, and I was like, man, I mean, that's kind of my Brittleden build, right? Like that's kind of but I wanted to do something original for for channel members, right? They're asking for something, so I was like, well, I don't want to just put out my Brittleden build again and like update it and what have you. I would be doing that anyways. But after looking into it and seeing like what other kind of basically Magicka type wardens I could do, I was like, the Brittleden just makes sense because what they wanted was both a like solo build, but also something they could take into group content, something they could also take out into the endless archive. So a lot of a lot of requirements there. So that is the deal, and that's why we are where we are. Let me just double check and make sure our chat bot is working okay. I don't think it is. It is not. I don't know what's going on with our chat bot. We'll try it again. Hey, what's going on, Terrell? Zombie Jesus, how you doing? Oh yeah, okay, cool. So I'll just leave him up here for a second. Terrell just saying, hey, Zombie Jesus saying he's back. Well, careful, the meta police might start being annoying again. Hey, man, the cool thing about a Brittleden is that it's actually is meta. A Brittleden is the best way to run a Magicka Warden, which is kind of why I came back to it. But yeah, I think that when I try to make builds, I want them to be like as effective as they can be. And if I lose 10, maybe 5, 10, maybe 15k damage, like that seems fine as long as there's a appropriate benefit, right? So getting a lot of survivability, getting a lot of utility and stuff like that. So when I try to make even my off meta builds are honestly I just like making optimal stuff. So it ends up not being too bad and too off meta. Terrell says, why is the bot? Oh no, there it goes. Okay, cool. It is popping up. What's weird is that it's popping up for you guys, but it's not popping up for me. Let me see if we can get it back up. Here, I can run a test. I could trigger a fake message. That's working, but I don't see. Terrell says, oh, I never really tried Warden, so I had no clue. Yeah. I mentioned it the other day, man. I was in a group that asked me to come fill for a trifecta on Halls of Fabrication. It's called TikTok Tormentor, aka TTT. And so I was in that. I was asked, this is a while back, and I was asked, to come and it was just told to parse. And they were like, cool, parse, come on the class you parse the highest on? Well, for me, that was my Brittleden. So I came on a Brittleden, and at first they were like, "What? Why? We don't need brittle. We have it. What are you doing?" I was like, "No, no, no. This is just the class that I parse highest on." So, and they're like, "Oh, okay." Like it was, they're a little bit like, "Wait, what?" But then it was fine after that. So, yeah. So where Moogle asked for a DK healer, and then Pat Battle asked for a warden using specifically Ares Cry, which is a set from Infinite Archive. And the reason I haven't done this build sooner, just so you guys know, I really don't like the Endless Archive. I ran it a lot on PTS to make guides for it and stuff like that. I ran it very little on live, and so I don't have all these sets collected. Let me go down and see what I got. But I've been going through and trying to collect them. So luckily, Mrs. Harrow has been helping me out with that to be able to collect more of these. Let me see what else Pat said here, and you know what? Maybe I can like just bring this out to you guys because these are while they're like channel member posts, so only channel members can see this stuff. It's not like private or anything like that. So up here is the request by Weremoogle. So Warden using Ares Cry. I know this is probably kind of small for you guys here. I can make it larger, but it's still gonna be pretty small here. Hey, Lyriel. Oh, cool, Brittleden. Yeah, yeah. And also the chat bot is now working, so that's great to see. Zombie Jesus says, the next build I want to make, focus on Necro Blastbone, seeing how high I can get Blastbone's damage. That's fun, man. Yeah, it was tiny. Yeah, sorry about that. It's still going to be tiny, but you know, I'll read it to you guys, so don't worry, you're not missing anything. All right. So Pat Battle here said Warden using Ares Cry. IA said I've yet to make a Warden or Necro. To be honest, DPS/solo work or seem smooth like the other classes to me. Okay, so this is a DPS that he wants it to be DPS. I think he means for group content, but also work in solo. And then I just asked for some clarification. Solo build other than a pure DPS. Here, let me say it. 2 bar. I asked about 1 bar, 2 bars. So he said 2 bar, and I mostly run Infinite Archive in a duo with my wife on her 1 bar Sork. We tend to change builds somewhere around Arc 5 or 6, depending on how our buffs got stacked, which is a good idea. And then definitely be duo. We also duo dungeons, Mag or Stam. I have no preferences. I have Nord or High Elf ready to go. Cool. So yeah, Nord or High Elf. I think High Elf, I was thinking, okay, that would make sense to run Magicka. And then he said, whatever, Mag or Stam. I think that the Magicka Warden, the Brittleden, because you have an Ice Staff, which basically makes you a tank for most practical purposes, is why I was like, yeah, we just need to do the Brittle on here. It's gonna make the most sense. And then he said, if you recommend, I can change the race up, which I don't think is necessary. Adashu, hopefully I'm saying that correct. It says heavy attack Arcanist without the Oaken Soul Ring if that's possible. Hey man, you got to be a channel member before you only for channel members. I'm sorry. It starts at $1 a month, but if you I don't know if you're trolling or if you're serious, but I'll do it. I've tried Arcanist make the least sense for any heavy attack builds because their beam lasts for 4.5 seconds and a heavy attack lasts for 1.8. So a 1 bar beam build on an Arcanist is easier than a heavy attack build, which is usually why most people do a heavy attack build, is because it's easy. And so it doesn't really make sense. But if you really want it and you become a channel member, I'll for a limited time, I'll grandfather you in and I'll do it for you. But I'm not taking any more requests right now in general. All right. I guess you know what, guys. If you become a member on this stream and put in a request on this stream, I will honor that. I will do it. It takes me weeks, guys. This was weeks ago, so just realize it's not going to be tomorrow or anything like that. It takes me a while. Woo! All right. Oh, didn't know that. Okay, thanks. Kind of new to the heavy attack thing. Yeah. Yeah, no worries, man. And I recently, Adashu, I've recently done a heavy attack build. Or I'm sorry, not a heavy attack build, a 1 bar build and it was like a solo, like unkillable, like you're at max resistances and everything else on an Arcanist. So if you look at Arcanist builds on the channel, you should be able to find it. I have a DPS playlist, and you should be able to find it, man. That thing, you can watch Netflix and solo stuff. It's like, you don't need to be paying attention. It works incredibly well. Terrell says 2 bar Stam Arc without the beam. Terrell, you know I've done that, right? Are you joking, or do you know that I've done that? because when the Arcanist first came out, like I didn't like the beam. I've come over to it now, but I really didn't like the beam, and so okay, you did know. Okay, yeah, well I made one. You can actually, because I was like, well, can you, like, if you just don't like the beam? Now, does it make sense? Not really, because it's just easier to use the beam, but the build actually works really well. I'm actually looking for it right now. You know what? I think I just, yeah, here it is. So at the time, this was basically the same as I did with the beam build, or pretty close to it. But it's this one right here. Or I guess I could hit. There we go. Oh, it's going to pop into it. But anyways, no beam, 2-bar build. It actually works really well, and it's kind of a PvP build, to be totally honest with you. But you just generate a bunch of crux using your spamble, and then you use tentacular dread. So there's a lot of builds out there. It works really well. It's way harder and does like a little bit less damage, but I mean it works so well that, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not broken, that's for sure. And that's the thing, like giving up like 5k, even like 2 3k like that build did, it's just not that big of a deal. I tried it. It's weird enough to have fun. Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. Zombie Jesus said when art came out, they shit on everything in BGG, so still can't stand them. Yeah. They've gotten weaker in recent history. All right, let's focus though. Let's talk about the Warden here. That's what we're doing today. Working on this for Pat. Appreciate Pat and everybody else who's a channel member, and really all you guys for supporting me. A lot of people think that like liking and subscribing is the thing to do, and it is. It's good. Giving a thumbs up, it's great. One of the much bigger things is sharing videos. If you share a video, if you like a video enough to share it with somebody, that tells YouTube, like, because they just want more people to watch, right? And so if you're sharing, more people are watching. It's not just saying, hey, I'm already here and I found this. No. I'm even sharing, so that matters even more. Focus. Terrell says focus. Okay, all right, we're focusing. So I did a little bit of prep for this, in that I think I cleared everything out for the most part. So we're going to go through and do that. Or cleared a lot of stuff out. I think my CP is cleared out. Let me just check. Yep, no CP. I got no real gear on. I do have Frostbite on. We might lean into this because it's a fun set. We're playing with a Brittleden. It will be an option for us. Might not be the best option, but it is an option if we can make it work. Historically, Frostbite has been a little bit worse than all the other sets. So it's something I mentioned, like, hey, you can run Frostbite, which is cool because it's thematic, but also realize you're going to lose a little bit of DPS. I don't know if that's true anymore with the scribing skill. So let's take a look. First thing I do usually is I go to a shrine of Stendar. And the reason I come here is because, we didn't clear everything. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and clear everything just to make it easy. It's because you can add all these passives and stuff and not have to like click confirm. And so it's just like a lot easier to come here and do all this. So we'll make sure that we got all of our passes for our skill line. We're going to do a double destro. We actually don't want trifocus. We're going to do double destro, so that we can always keep up the ice staff. We're just going with a fun thematic build. Bombas says, no way. I was just starting to look at updating my main from your old Brittleden. Oh, okay. Awesome, man. Cool. Well, I'm glad. Aptly timed. We'll go ahead and also grab all of these. There is one of these that you can skip. Which one is it? Is it Grace? Reduces snares, reduces the cost of sprint. Yeah, if you're low on skill points, you can leave out Grace. You're not really gonna lose anything. I think I have plenty of skill points, but we'll just leave it out for now. And similarly, I think there's the same thing. Yeah, improved sneak. We don't actually need this, so you can leave out improved sneak if you're low on skill points. You're not going to lose anything on your build really, unless you're sneaking around on your Nightblade. What else do we need? We'll leave the rest of these passives until we grab those skills, and then we'll spec into them, I think. Okay, now let me ask a question, and you guys tell me what you think. Class skills versus non-class skills. People have asked before for builds that don't have that are like class agnostic. And you can do that. Does anybody know why that doesn't quite work? And why it's going to be kind of, I mean, you can make it work, but why it's usually not very good? Does anybody know? And this kind of comes into the game design aspect of ESO and how these class skills work. Well, I'll give you guys a second as I grab a drink. All right. So I know a lot of you guys are doing stuff like I know Mrs. Harrow is at the gym right now because the fun animal skills are class skills. Lyriel says 100%. Lyriel's right. No, Terrell says the passives. Lyriel says, and you shouldn't skip those. You got to have the fun animal skills. That's a great idea. Passives can, Terrell, absolutely be a thing. Let me. Lyriel says, "Yeah, stop my set to reply." Oh, that's cute. Cool. Well, Lyriel loves animals. For those who don't know, so with it's important to have animal friends. Oh, cool. We got some answers coming in. I'll pause for it. I'll keep reading these. Bomba says the more class skills, the better IMO. I want to play a warden for the warden stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So Bombus, you've kind of so Terrell is right. Lyriel is right. You're all right. These are all good reasons. What I was getting at as far as from the game design perspective is a little bit more what Terrell and what Bombus were saying. I think Bombus kind of hitting it on the head. So you want classes ideally to have some sort of identity. Whenever you play a warden, you want it to feel like you're playing a warden, right? Otherwise, what's the point of having classes at all? And sure, yeah, you can get away with classes, but ESO has them. They exist right now. Rumors that could be changing, but for right now they have them. So the thing with, if you want classes to have an identity, what you need to have abilities that are better than the alternatives. Because if there's a class agnostic skill that is better than a class skill, everybody's going to run that skill. And this has constantly been a battle throughout time with ESO and the developers kind of going back and forth. And a lot of times they would like accidentally make a skill really good. And that happens from time to time. And what will happen is you'll see a bunch of builds and people talking about it. But I never really cover that stuff. Why? Because I know that that's not what they want. And so I know that skill is going to get nerfed eventually because they don't want a skill that is just so good that everybody has to use it, right? This happened back in the day with the Psijic skill line, which I don't have on this character, with Elemental Weapon, Ellie Weapon, where it was just the best spammable, and so everybody was using it, right? But it's only for so long, and then sure enough, they nerfed it, and then it's something else. It happens from time to time. You do want options, but what you'll see is that class skills have to be better than other skills. Otherwise, classes lose all identity. And since they've chosen to have class identity, certain skills on that from that class have to be good. Okay, so typically often how they'll do this is they'll have a skill that does similar damage to other skills that are not class skills. Let me just compare a couple here. We're choosing this semi-arbitrarily. We're going to go with Entropy from the Mage's Guild skill line. We'll go Degenerate. Okay, cool. And we look at these and we see that Degenerate, and we might have to pull out a calculator here. So bind an enemy with chaotic magic, dealing 9,000 damage over 21 seconds. That would go up to higher if one of these Mage's Guild passives increases the duration of Mage's Guild skills. Yeah, it's this one right here. And I don't have the skill maxed out. So just realize this will go up to a few seconds higher. And then it says, I think it should be 20 seconds that goes up to 22. I think even though I took all the skill points out, I don't think it's registering on the tooltip here. That's why it's saying something different. So Mel, I was just talking to Lyriel, being like, I need to DM Mel and see how she's doing. It's so good to see you. Robert Miller says, 100% agree with the sentiment. I like having class identity. It's the whole reason I choose a particular class to play. Exactly, Robert. So this skill does 9,000 damage and also gives major brutality and sorcery. And then we look over at the Fetcher. The Fetcher does 9,300 over 20 seconds. Okay. And then it also, whenever you look at this, every second cast of the ability deals 60% increased damage. That's huge. And it also provides minor vulnerability, which increases a target's damage taken by 5%. So if you had to pick a dot, I mean, this one gives major brutality and sorcery, but you can get that other places. Even if you couldn't, like, you probably could. You could always find this from somewhere else. You can see that even the base fetcher does more damage and provides that minor vulnerability, which historically has been hard to get. Now it's a lot easier. Still, it's useful for solo, and it does 60% more on the second cast, which makes this way more damage than something like Degenerate. So we're going to go with Fetcher, right? That just as an example. We're gonna come back to it though. Mel says, "I'm alive, but I'm deep in the Vengeance Zero now." Okay, we'll keep doing what you got to do in Zero, for whatever faction you're working for. All right, so that's what we see is that usually there's class skills, at least a handful, that are just much better than other skills, okay? And then our passives can also inform us. Our passives, if you just read the passives, guys, you will know more than like 99% of people just in the game, period, just as an FYI. Now, on a Warden, Scorch is one of our core abilities, okay? This is just, it's one of the things every class, not every class, maybe every class, most classes have some ability that is very defining of their playstyle. So for a Nightblade, for example, it's your Spectral Bow. Your Spectral Bow, you have to light attack weave, and then you cast that, and it does a ton of damage. Pretty core. Also, your Incapacitating Strikes, which is like a really low-cost ultimate that you cast all the time that buffs, gives you small damage windows, right? Those are things that kind of define the Nightblade playstyle. Also doing a lot of direct damage as opposed to doing damage over time. Okay, so this is one of the core abilities. Now we have two options here. We've got Deep Fissure, and we can just look at the new effect at the bottom of the screen, and it applies major and minor breach to enemies hit, reducing their physical and spell resistance. That's pretty cool because it's in an AoE. So major and minor breach in an AoE. Now, what we're going to find out is we're going to be using our Ice Wall of Elements, and we're probably going to use something we're always going to be chilling that opponent, and we're going to see that that's going to provide minor breach. Now, I also know if we're doing a Brittleden, we're probably going to be using Elisus, which provides major breach. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I kind of have to. So we know that we're probably not going to choose this morph. And you know what? In any build nowadays, you always want some abilities that cost both, if you're doing a mag build, you want a few stamina costing abilities. If you're doing a stamina build, you want a few magicka costing abilities, because otherwise you're sitting at full of that other resource, and all those recoveries are just kind of wasted. And so it always makes sense for your recovery wise to just have a couple of each skill line, almost always. Otherwise, if you go all magicka on a build, you're gonna have magicka sustain problems. You're gonna have to like change skills around to make that okay, and it's gonna be difficult. Bomba says, "I hope Sub Assault, Cutting Dive, and Frost Reach stays. The way they sync up perfectly is probably my favorite thing about them." Well, I think you're probably going to be in luck there, Bombas. All right, so we're going to use Subterranean Assault. It converts to a stamina ability and deals poison damage, reduces the cost and time it takes for the ability to deal damage, and the second hit no longer deals increased damage. All right. So it does less increased damage. If you actually do the math on these guys, just as an FYI, Sub Assault does a little bit more damage, just as an FYI. So this is the optimal damage. The other thing about this, if Deep Fissure did ice damage, I would go with Deep Fissure for the theming. But we're going to go with Subterranean Assault. Also, I will note that this build is for Pat. And so I'm even if this, like, the Brittleden is not going to get in the way of this being for Pat, but I think that we can do both. And I think it's going to make the most sense, honestly, to do both. So we're going to lean into it. Oh my gosh. Lyriel says bear, or I'm unsubscribing. All right, we'll go to the bear next. So we are going to run our Feral Guardian. Absolutely. We're going to run the bear. So our Eternal Guardian deals magicka damage. The difference between these, I don't want to go deep into this right now. I think the Wild Guardian does a little bit more damage right now, and that's all we're going for from this. The Eternal Guardian will automatically respawn whenever it's killed. It's actually going to be best in like solo content, like the Endless Archive and a lot of places, to go with the Eternal Guardian. So that would be best for like solo content because it can die in a lot of that. In group content, I think we're going to be fine with going with the Wild Guardian. I don't think we need to worry about it dying that often and having to recast it. But if we have to recast it, it's probably best to just change the morph. So for right now, and again, this is not going to be perfect. You'll see that making a build is an iterative process. We're going to take a pass at it, make the best options, go with what we think is going to work, and then we'll iterate. And we'll also, a lot of times when I'm doing like a full on, I get pretty sweaty into this. I'll make notes about like, hey, here's an alternate play style that we could do, right? Like if I'm making the Arcanist, right? When I did the non-beam build, I was like, well, what if we didn't have the beam, right? Okay, so then it's like, okay, well, it's not going to be built about on the beam, and then you make a totally different build. So there's always that kind of stuff to be taken into consideration. All right, so we got our Wild Guardian. Luckily, Lyriel won't unsubscribe now since we have the bear. She loves her animals. Jesus says, I just got the game. I like that the skills have a lot going on. Yeah, 100%. And then Bombus here asks, how does Dawnbreaker front bar and Ice Storm back bar compare to the bear? Well, Bombus, if we went with your option, Lyriel would unsubscribe, so we can't do that. But no, I actually, on my Brittleden build, which you're probably thinking about, I recommend you go with the Dawnbreaker on your front bar as a passive, because having Fighter's Guild skills increases your weapon and spell damage just by being on your bar. And then on the back bar, you can use Ice Storm. Are you talking about this one? Is it Northern Storm, I think? I wish this were better. I need to double check the math on it, but like historically, Northern Storm has not been very good. It's been inferior to running something like the Destro. You can run Destro, you can run Elemental Rage, or Mage's Guild if you have it leveled. Meteor is the best thing typically to do. We'll have to look. I haven't looked at it in a while, but historically it's been okay. And it would be fine if you don't have those other things like leveled, but it hasn't been as good, which is a little bit disappointing because I've always wanted it to be the optimal thing to do, and it just hasn't quite been there. I haven't checked in a few patches, so we will need to double check that when we get to it. But you do that in situations where you need big burst damage. So if you're in trash, for example, the optimal thing is to run one of those big ultis and then drop it. Or if you're in really AoE focused fights, the bear is a little bit more single target. Even if it does a little bit of cleave, it's not as good as those big ultimates. The other thing is if you're going into a fight, having the big ultimate is better since you have a little ultimate anyways. You have it stored up. It'll just do more damage than having casting a bear with 400 ultimate, but it only takes 80 or whatever to cast our bear, 75 to cast our bear. So yeah. All right. Let me see here. Okay. Animal companions. So we need to figure out. No problem. Another thing that is really good, and I know this because I know Warden, right? So I've read through all these skills. I kind of know most of what they do. So we have a choice on our dive here. So it's another animal ability, which Lyriel will like, thank goodness. So we have a choice between the cutting dive, converts to a stamina, deals bleed damage instead, and applies damage over time to enemies hit. Or we have our screaming cliff racer, which is really interesting. It can set enemies off balance, but it also gives us 100 weapon and spell damage for 10 seconds after casting it, but that quadruples against off-balance enemies. Interesting, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go with the screaming cliff racer here, and we're going to use this as a semi-spammable. So whenever that off-balance window is up, we're going to use this to proc that passive to get that 400 weapon and spell damage, which will be up most of the time. And the cool thing is, we're going to see in a second, is that the damage it does is very similar to our spammable. So we're just it's just replacing our spammable for one cast. So we don't really lose any damage there. And then it gives us that 400 weapon and spell damage, which is significant. Now it does make, this is one of those things, guys, that it does make for a much more complex playstyle. You have to know your enemies are off balance and you have to cast it in that window. So this might be a skill that we say, hey, if you want maximum damage, use this. But if you're in an AoE fight, or if you don't want to keep track of those off-balance windows, maybe you don't use this. Maybe use something else. Do you guys also want to hear something tragic? I was recording that Nightblade video before this, and a chord had gotten messed up, and I recorded the whole thing, and I'm gonna have to re-record because I don't think the audio is right. Anyways, all right. Lyriel says, I'm told to lash trash back before Teleria. It's good to run Dash or Ult or something because it's too dangerous in there, in that room for my bear. Yes. Yes, that is why you take off the bear, that I have told Lyriel, is that you got to keep the bear safe. And there's some trash packs where people are known to wipe because there's a lot of things there. So you take the bear off for safety, and then you run your Destro ult or something else. Yes, indeed, protect the bear. All right. So Screaming Cliff Racer, I think this is going to be really good. That 400 ultimate is significant, or 400 weapon and spell damage, not ultimate, I'm sorry, is significant, and we don't really lose any damage. I think it's going to be worth running. I don't know this for sure, okay, but I think it is. The other thing is our Fetcher Infection. So single target damage, second cast, this is a good dot by itself, okay? Good dot by itself, provides the minor vuln, pretty nice. Oftentimes we won't need it, but in group content, but it's still very good. It's great in solo content. Still single target. Keep that in mind. The other morph of this is a stamina morph and it's AoE damage. So if we actually want AoE damage, we would go for the other morph of this, and that's something you could change up, like for Endless Archive, for example, or something like that. But we want maximum single target damage, so we're going to go with the Magicka morph, and we're going to put that on our back bar. We'll talk more about front bar and back bar now, or in a minute, rather. Okay, what else we got? We got our Betty Natch. So this has historically been just for recoveries. But if we actually look at this, now it cleanses you, which it always did. But if it can't, if there's no negative effects on you, it instead increases your damage by 5%. I think this is probably worth running, and we might need the Magicka recoveries. So we're actually going to put this on. This might be something that we flex out or we take off, but for right now, we're going to put it on our bar. Jesus says, Mel says, protect the bear. Jesus says, so are the passives active all the time, or does it need abilities slotted in the same tree? It depends on the passives. We'll look at it. Actually, we can look at it now. So Falcon Swiftness, FYI, provides you with one of them, Minor Evasion for one morph. The other morph provides you with Minor Berserk. You can get this other places. You really just use this for the speed, which can be helpful, but it's not something where it's not going to be core to our build here. Bond with Nature. So anytime one of your animal companion skills ends, you're healed for 1.3k. This is cute, but not enough to warrant doing anything about. Okay, so we're kind of going to ignore it. Savage Beast, whenever you cast an animal companion ability while you are in combat, you generate 4 ultimate. This can occur once every 4 seconds. So that's really cool because right now we have Subterranean Assault, we have Fetcher Infection, we have 5. So this is going to be proccing all the time. So we're going to be getting a decent amount of ulta on this. Rarely, so every class has something that's basically like this, where it'll give you X amount of ult, and that can proc 2x seconds. So if it gives you 4 ultimate, it procs once every 8 seconds. It gives you 3 ultimate, it procs once every 6 seconds. It's almost never worth trying to proc this to get that little bit of ultimate back, but it is a nice to have, not something you're going to build around in any situation. There's better ways to get ultimate now. Flourish increases your Magicka and stamina recovery by 12% if an animal companion ability is slotted. That's really, I mean, that's a lot. 12%, that's huge. So we're mostly going to have our bear, but even if we need to put our bear up for safety, that's why we might want to run one of these skills, and we have 2 of them, on our back bar. Okay, so that's important to note, just so that we have those passives. And then Advanced Species increase the critical damage by 4% for each animal ability slotted. Oh, that's interesting. So this is something where, why does it say 0? It's just not registering, where we might want to, this also might affect where we want to put those skills. Most of the time it would be on our front bar, and we just want to make sure that we get to that critical damage cap. If we're over it, it doesn't really matter, but that's important to note. Now let's go ahead and move on and talk about Green Balance. Now Green Balance, we have heals, 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 and heals. So I don't really think we want to slot any of these in most circumstances. Lotus Flower is kind of interesting because it does provide us with Minor Prophecy and Minor Savagery, which we might want these passives, but I actually think there's a better place to get this from. So, and it heals us for a little bit based on, whenever we do damage, but I don't think it's enough to write home about. Okay, I don't think it's going to save us or anything. Living Vines has historically, unfortunately, been hot garbage. It's just a really bad heal, and it just kind of sucks. I don't know that they need to do something. It just kind of sucks. Um, Healing Seeds can actually be, with the Budding Seeds morph, can be really good. If we're in a group with no Warden, we want to run this skill to provide some passive buffs. Let me see here. Minor Toughness. Yeah, Minor Toughness. Whenever you activate a heal on yourself or an ally, you grant the target Minor Toughness, increasing their max health by 10% for 20 seconds. So if there's no other Warden, you're almost always going to have a Warden healer in a group, but you might want to run one of these. We'll be healing ourselves anyways, so it actually doesn't have to be one of our skills, but as long as we're healing ourselves, we'll get that bonus even solo, so we don't really need to worry about this. Fungal Growth can be used as our burst heal if we need it or want it, but it's also an AoE. It's pretty expensive, and we don't really need it for the most part, so we're not going to be using it. Just kind of is what it is. Let me see. Accelerated growth. Whenever you heal yourself or an ally under 40%, you gain major mending. It's cool. It's a healer thing. Nature's Gift. Whenever you heal an ally with a green balance ability, you get Magicka or stamina back. Again, not really going to apply to us. And then Emerald Moss. Increase your healing done with green balance abilities by 2% for each one. This is, again, just a healer thing. So our green balance, typically all classes have one healing tree, one tanking tree, and one DPS tree. However, a lot of classes, probably like half of them, it's less. So like the Warden, this is purely a healing tree, right? Like we don't even care about most of these skills. We got one passive that we care about. We're not even going to run the rest of these skills. That is kind of unusual. Most classes will have some skills in here that can be used on a tank or on a DPS, even though they're healing skills. Not really so much with a Warden. And then Winter's Embrace. So this would be our tanking skill line on the Warden. So, unfortunately, not as much here that we can use. Our Frost Cloak. Frost Cloak can actually be amazing. So Ice Fortress here provides us with Major Resolve. Any basic tank build, you always want Major Resolve. But on a DPS build, when you want maximum survivability, you want to figure out what skill and from your class provides this and potentially slot it. So this will reduce our damage taken. Major Resolve reduces your damage taken by 9%. And then this morph also provides us with minor protection, further reducing our damage taken by 5%. So this is a skill we might want to slot for maximum survivability a little bit later on. Not something we'll run most of the time, but like in the Infinite Archive, this is a skill we'd probably want to run. I will also note that even though this is this morph has a smaller radius, it still affects those around us. So, for example, let me pull this up. For Pat here, he might want to cast this to provide Major Resolve for his wife whenever they're doing duos in the Infinite Archive, okay? And honestly, it would be pretty reasonable to expect that. So probably this skill is going to flex out somewhere on our bar. Next up is Impaling Shards. Now, the morph up here, immobilize enemies, reduce the cost, and does it scale? Yeah, it scales off max health, okay? Whenever you see something scaling off of max health, here, tank. This is a tank skill. So probably not what we're going to run. We look at Winter's Revenge. It instead spawns at the target location instead of centered on us, and it deals damage based on the effectiveness of our offensive stats rather than max health. Okay, so this is what we want for a DPS. We want Winter's Revenge. We're going to put it on our back bar, partially as a learning tool, but we'll see in a second. After that, we have Arctic Wind. Arctic Wind has been changed. This used to be so much better, and it's really disappointing. They changed it because Brittledens were too strong in PvP, and they are still very strong, but this is like one of the things. So this used to guaranteed heal you. Now it only heals you if there are no enemies nearby. So instead it deals some upfront damage, and then it does damage over time. And the other morph here is just a heal, and we want damage, so we're going to go with Arctic Blast. Now, oh, it doesn't actually. Let me look here. So the additional thing is it damages enemies instead of healing yourself, and heals if there are no enemies that are damaged, stuns enemies after a delay, and reduces the cost. Okay, so that's the difference in morph here. So we're going for maximum damage. We can't use this as Brittleden slander. We can't use this as our major heal anymore. Because if we hit a target, it won't heal us. So it can't be a reliable burst heal for us anymore, which makes me a very sad panda. So that's kind of unfortunate. Another thing here is it says it has a high chance to apply the chilled status effect. Look how they massacred my boy. Yeah, that was upsetting. They changed this for PvP, and it just like completely screwed up the perfectly fine playstyle for us PvEers. And they always do this, you know, they constantly do this. I mean, now that they're going to have like specialty skills for PvP, maybe they could change it back. Maybe they could unbreak this. That would be really cool. Funny thing is, Wardens are super strong in PvP now. Yeah, I kind of figured they were still really strong, Mel, because not that much has changed, but this is enough to, it's enough to piss me off. I'll say that. Really annoying. I will note here that both of these abilities say they have a higher chance to apply the chilled status effect, both Winter's Revenge and Arctic Blast. In my experience, and I haven't tested this out this patch, but I don't think it's changed, Arctic Blast, a lot of people see the Winter's Revenge and didn't see it on Arctic Blast. Arctic Blast is even higher. Arctic Blast will proc just about every second when we have all of our passives going. It's huge. It actually is more chilled procking than Winter's Revenge, just as an FYI. This one's higher, but Arctic Blast is by far better. I think one of them used to not say it, but it just used to have it, like maybe Arctic Blast, but I could be remembering that wrong. All right, next up, Crystallized Shield. So this is a skill that provides us with a huge shield versus missile attacks. Situationally, it's awesome, but not really needed. Then we have Frozen Gate. This is basically a chain. It's a Warden's version of a chain. We don't really need it on this build. It's nice to know about, nice to use in certain situations, but we don't really need it. So we'll look at our passives here. We have Glacial Presence, increases the chance to apply Chilled status effect by 200% and increases its damage by 438. This is huge, and this is why the Brittleden playstyle is meta, or can be meta, for a Magicka Warden. And Magicka, because most of these skills that do ice damage cost Magicka. And then Frozen Armor increases your physical and spell resistance for each Winter's Embrace ability slotted. So we can actually increase our resistance by a significant amount by moving these skills onto certain bars. Not going to make or break anything, but it might inform our decisions if we have no other reason or no other, compelling reason to put something on our front or our back bar. Maybe we'd want to stack these skills on our front bar for those extra resistances and survivability, and then reduce the effectiveness of snares applied to us. We don't really care. Piercing Cold, dealing frost damage, grants you Piercing Cold for 6 seconds. So up to once every 4 seconds, Piercing Cold increases the amount of damage you can block by 12% if you have 30k more or more max health, or increases your damage done by 8% if you do not. Okay, so doing frost damage, to simplify all that, doing frost damage, which we'll always be doing in this build, increases our damage by 8% if our health is under 30k, which we want to keep our health under 30k to get that extra 8% damage, which is pretty massive, honestly. Just like a passive 80% more damage. It's pretty huge. Okay, well, we've put all of the good class skills that we want for maximum damage on our bar. We've noted a few that could be situationally useful, and we haven't put them on our bar, but we did kind of note them. Now let's move on. We want to run double ice staffs because we want this to be a Brittleden. Why do we want that? Well, if you look here, let me see, is it down here? One of these, let me find it. Ah, yes, Ancient Knowledge. So with a Destruction staff equipped, if you're running an Inferno staff, you get a buff, Lightning staff, you get a buff. If you're running an Ice staff, it reduces the cost of block by 36% and increases the amount of damage you can block by 20%. Okay, this is the same buff that you get from Sword and Board skill line that makes tanks. This is what makes a tank a tank. And so we basically can block like a tank. Now, we're not in heavy armor. We might not quite be at resistance cap and what have you, but just this buff by itself means that we can block like a tank, which is awesome, really cool, and makes the Brittleden playstyle really interesting. We also have Elemental Force, increasing your chance to apply status effects by 100%. Again, we get extra damage whenever we apply the chilled status effect. We also have extra chance of applying it, and this just buffs that even more. So that's really cool because, just so you guys know how this works, is like your chance of applying a status effect is based on what kind of damage it is. So damage over time is lower than like a direct damage typically, and then like AoE damage is lower than like a single target damage over time. Okay, so if we cast the skill and it puts a dot on a target, one target, it's going to have a higher chance typically than a skill that we can cast in the AoE, right? Because if it's in an AoE, it's going to hit multiple targets, and it's just kind of a way of controlling how good certain abilities are. With this 100% increase doesn't mean it's 100% chance. It means that this very low percent chance is now increased by 100%. And we get a bunch of these things stacking both from our class skill line and from the Destro staff skill line, and the increased damage to our chilled status effect is what makes the Brittleden style of play so good for a Warden, okay? Now, I will note that we could still do some ice damage on a Warden, which we always would be, and that would still give us that 8% bonus from the passives. You don't have to be an ice warden, is my point, but it's a good play style. It works well. We also have here your destruction staff. Oh my gosh, your destruction staff abilities ignore some spell resistances. Cool, but not something we can really control. And then we also have here a trifocus. So if you block with an ice staff, it costs magic instead of stamina. We don't want this because we're going to be using that ice staff. I will also note that if you look here at various places, both Trifocus and Ancient Knowledge, that other kinds of staffs get bonus damage. We do not from the Destruction Staff skill line, which is why we need those class passives to make it viable and optimal for us to run an ice staff, which we have. So we don't want our blocking to cost magicka. It doesn't regen whenever you're blocking, and it would just make us run out of magicka, so we're not going to run Trifocus. And then the last one here is Destructive Expert. When you kill an enemy with a Destruction Staff, you restore magicka. You can also get a damage shield. It's cool, not going to make or break anything. It's just there. All right, now on our wall of elements, there's one skill from every skill line that will keep our back bar and chance procced while on our front bar. And on a destruction staff, that is going to be Wall of Elements, okay? So there's also the fact that we're probably going to use a Maelstrom backbar weapon. That's usually the best thing to do on most builds. So that Maelstrom weapons buff our Wall of Elements, so that's what we're going to use. We have two choices here. We could go with Unstable Wall of Elements. It only lasts for 10 seconds, but then has a direct damage that explodes at the end. Or we can go with Elemental Blockade, much wider, and it also lasts longer. Oh my gosh, this isn't even leveled up. It should last for 15 seconds. As I level this up, it'll go up to 15-second duration. Man, I can't believe that's not leveled up. That's crazy. Well, a lot of times now, these do basically the same damage. And it can be nice to have the longer duration so that you can cast more spammables. So it kind of depends on your build, kind of depends on how sweaty you want to get. But most of the time, it's better to go with Blockade. Yeah, just because the opportunity cost. If I have to cast this, so this 10 seconds, this will go to 15. If I have to cast this twice every 30 seconds versus 3 times every 30 seconds, that means I can cast my spammable one more time during that 30-second window. Now, it's one cast over 30 seconds, maybe not the end of the world, but if our spammable is really good, which it will be, then it's probably better to go with a longer duration. And that's kind of the way this works out, okay? And it depends on what else we have on our bar, how long the duration on those are, and what have you. But a lot of times right now, Blockade is the better option. Now, we've got a lot of ice skills here. We've also got Destructive Touch. Now, this is actually going to be Destructive Reach in particular, not Clinch. Clinch, Taunt. We do not want Clinch unless we're tanking. We want Destructive Reach. And the reason we want this skill is because it's going to be our primary spammable. Why? Because we're going to see it does. So if you look here, it does a little bit. It does frost damage, which is what we want for our spammable on a brittle build, and it does a little bit more damage. So, and if you look here, it does damage over time, but if you look at just the upfront damage, it's actually more than our cliff racer, for example. So it works well just as a spammable, and the damage over time, we're often going to be recasting this too early for that to tick all the way down, always rather, for that to tick down, but it is a nice thing to have. And you know, if you have multiple targets, but you're in your single target setup, you could dot up multiple ones with this skill. Lucas says, I like running Lotus in VSS Portal for a little heal while doing damage. Well, there you go. Yeah, and what is that heal? I think it's one of those things, Luca. Would you agree that it's one of those things? If you're running portals and you only need a little bit of a heal, like it'll work. Same thing maybe with Cloud Rest. If you're in portals, you could run like a smaller heal, and then but if you're a new player, oftentimes you want a bigger heal. You want like because you're going to take more damage than is strictly necessary, and so you want to make sure, and you want something that you can burst. But yeah, absolutely, definitely an option there. And you know, to Luca's point here, whenever I'm making these builds, guys, please understand that you know I try to keep them at a reasonable duration. Sometimes I've made really long, really in-depth builds, and I will continue to do that. But I don't do that with all of my builds because it's too much information. I try to give you like, hey, here's a good build. Looking into these things and like trying stuff out for yourself is always going to be the best thing, because there might be something where I don't mention it because it is a niche situation. And if I mention every niche situation, all my videos would be 2 hours long. So just realize that while I am trying to provide you with all, you know, as much information as I can, I always have to cut stuff out. So it's great if you just read the abilities, figure out what they do. You might figure out something that works, you know, good for certain situations. Maybe you'll find out something that I missed and that works even better. That's happened before too. So just keep all that in mind. I appreciate you pointing something like that out, Luca. Bomba says, one counterpoint regarding the Wall of Frost. I don't mind the shorter duration since it still lines up with Winter's Revenge well enough to kind of treat both as one thing to keep up. Well, there you go. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think that there could be reason to run both of these. It could also depend on what CP you're running, depending on how much direct damage you're doing versus damage over time. So blockade is all damage over time, but if we ran unstable, it's both, because there's a direct damage portion and then a damage over time. We're talking very small amounts of damage, but that's how you get the big parses, is by doing it. Another thing I will point here is if you read it, Blockade of Frost costs more, but snares and reduces armor against chilled enemies and grants damage shields. Man, is that really the tooltip on this? That sucks. Wow, that's a terrible tooltip. Okay, what it means by reduces enemies' armor is that if you have a chilled enemy, which is the condition there, it will provide minor breach. Okay, a lot of people don't know this, but if you have an enemy who is chilled in an ice wall of elements, it provides minor breach. This is something that even like really sweaty in-game tanks like didn't pick up on for like months and months and months. And I mean, the tooltip is horrible, but that's what this does. So with this build, remember we talked about earlier, if we keep our ice wall down, it will provide us with minor breach, which will be very important for solo content, and honestly can be helpful if we're in unoptimized or unorganized group content to be able to make sure we have that minor breach. So that's pretty cool. And again, we don't lose anything. This is just kind of a passive thing that's nice for us to have. Now, another ability here is going to be elemental susceptibility. So elemental susceptibility, and I'm not going quite as deep through all of these skills here, guys, just for time's sake. But every 7.5 seconds, it applies the burning, chilled, and concuss status effect, all three. So remember, chilled is the main thing that we want to be doing, because we get extra damage from that. Basically, what it means is that this skill is worth running for the damage. And the cool thing about this skill is that, first off, it doesn't cost anything. That's going to really help us with our sustain. And the other thing is that it also provides major breach. So remember earlier I was talking about major and minor breach. Well, here we go. We don't need the other morph of subterranean assault because it gives major and minor breach, and we just don't need that because we have our own source. So I want to put this on our bar. We're in a situation. We're going to put it up here for right now. We're going to move it in a second, but we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so that's really good. Now another thing, impulse here. Impulse is, or Pulsar rather, is a really cool ability that provides an AoE ice damage based on our staff type. It also provides minor mangle, reducing opponents' max health by 10%, which is again kind of a nice thing to have. And then Frost Pulsar with our ice staff also provides minor protection, which is just kind of cool. We can use this as a spammable in trash. Historically, that's what we've done. It also will help us provide that minor brittle because it's ice damage in an AoE, can be really good. So this might be something where we swap out here on AoE fights versus our Frost Reach. We'll get more into that. Or we might use something else. We'll have to see. Okay, so we're almost full here. So we got light armor. Typically, it is best right now in group content to always run medium armor, and because you're going to get to pin cap. Otherwise, maybe one piece of light. It just depends on what's going on. So just keep that in mind. Even on Magicka builds, and that makes our Magicka recovery a little bit tough. If you're new, less experienced, if you're leveling, leveling sustain is horrible. If you're on a Magicka build, use light armor, mostly light armor. Don't use medium, okay? Because you'll see the passives here. Let me see here. Which one is it? Yeah, so Evocation, and there's the same thing in the medium armor skill line that does basically the same thing, but Evocation increases your recovery by 4% for each piece of light armor worn, so that's huge. That's recoveries, 4%, and then reduces the magic cost of abilities by 2% for each ability worn. Now, a note here, recoveries tick every 2 seconds, and the Magicka cost applies to every skill cast, which could be once every second. So these basically double up. They're basically the same value. Just, one of them will typically proc twice a second. The other one will proc once every 2 seconds. They're not exactly the same, but it's pretty similar. This is massive. That's going to be, if we're running 5 pieces, that's 20%. Okay. Times 2. So that's going to be huge, and that will make our recovery so much easier. But if we can, it is more optimal typically to run medium armor. And the reason for that, there's a passive here that will give us extra penetration per piece of light armor worn. Here it is, concentration. And if we're already at pin cap without needing to run this, the other thing that provides us with damage is Prodigy, which increases our critical rating. Everything else doesn't really increase our damage rather. And then we'll find that there's 2 passives in the medium armor skill line. One will increase our weapon and spell damage, and the other one will increase our weapon and spell critical. Okay, so weapon and spell critical, weapon and spell damage on medium armor, penetration, and then critical chance on the light armor. Well, if we don't need the penetration, then we only have one benefit to our damage, and these 2 benefits outweigh the other one. Okay, now if we were already over on our critical damage, then it would kind of be like a 1-for-1. 6 one way, half a dozen the other, but typically we're not quite, so usually medium armor is best. That goes with all classes, all specs. That's just the way, that's why everybody runs medium armor right now, guys, in case you're wondering. Bomba says, counterpoint regarding the wall of, oh, no, I'm sorry, I already read that. Okay, my bad. Cool. So let's go to Fighters Guild. So one of the things we always need is Trap Beast. And the reason we need it is because we always want the minor force buff, because we're always trying to make sure we get to that critical damage cap. Now, if we can get there without this is probably a skill we can drop. But for right now, we almost definitely want it, so we're going to keep it on our bar. For Mage's Guild skill line, we kind of already went why these skills do a little bit less damage, so we're not super worried about them. Undaunted, kind of the same situation. Like typically our class skills will do more damage than these. Also, none of these are frost damage, so we're not super worried about it. So on and so forth. Typically with these other like Undaunted and the Assault skill line, to some extent Mage's Guild and Fighters Guild, these are kind of fill-in skills. So like you can always get a decent single target dot with Entropy, a little bit of AoE with Fiery Ruin, and you always choose the Scalding Ruin morph. Yeah, what else is there? There are a handful of other things. There are also passive skills you can put on your bar, like Mage Light for Magicka builds, typically an Expert Hunter for stamina builds. You could always run Necrotic Orb on most builds, although it's really expensive Magicka costing wise. Assault, you could always run Caltrops. there's a lot of different things you could do. And one of the cool things about if you run caltrops, anti-cavalry is the best for damage, but if you need AoE major breach, you could just run razor caltrops. These are kind of fill-in skills though, because you'll, again, as we talked about, usually your class skills are better, and most of what we've chosen are class skills. Okay, so there is a situation where maybe we drop our Blue Betty, maybe this 5% damage increase from this skill isn't worth it, and if we just actually had a damage increasing skill, we could swap it out here. We're going to have to try that out to figure out how that shakes out, basically. Team Frizzy says, what is a Brittleden? Some sort of warden, but I'm assuming, but I don't know what brittle is. Oh, yeah, Frizzy. So brittle is a status effect that you can apply. Well, you apply the chilled status effect, and that can proc brittle. Brittle causes a target to take 10%, in the case of minor brittle, 10% more critical damage. And it's a buff you always want in your group to help get you to that critical damage cap. Or solo, it's really nice because it increases your critical damage and usually not at cap in solo content. So it's an ability that typically now tanks can run. They run Frost Clinch, and then they run Elemental Susceptibility on their back bar. And if they double Ice Staff tank, two of them casting that Elemental Susceptibility, they can basically keep it up 100% of the time. Other groups or other situations, you could also run Rune of the Colorless Pool from the Arcanist skill line, which honestly I was really pissed off about when they came out, because it was like the Warden, you had a reason to run a Warden for a long time, and then the Arcanist, in addition to all the other things that the Arcanists get, they also kind of took away from the Warden's playstyle by not needing one in the group, because now you could just run Rune of the Colorless Pool. Anyways, I'm a little bit bitter about it still, but but it's okay now. So it is what it is. And we do it kind of passively. So it's a bonus in single player or single, solo content. And then in group content, it can be useful in unorganized groups because they're not going to have those buffs. And they're not, if they have them, they're not going to keep them up very well. So it's kind of nice for there. And then in optimized groups, you don't need it, but it's just part of our innate part of our build. So Lyriel said that made me so mad with the Rune of the Colorless Pool. Yeah, it was completely unnecessary is what made me mad. Like, they already have so many buffs on the Arcanist. It's like, why did they have to take away from the Brittleden playstyle? Yeah, it was upsetting to say the least. What about an Arcanist makes you think that they should be applying Brittle consistently, right? Like, nothing. It doesn't really make sense. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, Zoss. All right. Well, looks like we filled up our bars here. Now, again, this is not our final form. So let's see what else we can do. One of the questions we should ask ourselves is like, should we put a skill on our front bar or our back bar? Now, there might be passives, as we looked at, that make a skill more important to be on our front bar versus our back bar. The only one that I can really remember is like resistances for our ice theme, our Winter's Embrace theme skills, and then having some animal ability on both bars, which we're going to have no matter what. That'll be an easy thing to do. And there's not really a compelling reason for most of these other skills. So what do? Well, with most builds, you want to spend most of your time on your front bar. That means that you spend like 75% of your time, give or take, on your front bar. That's what you typically want to do. Your back bar is typically, because of that, you put your longer duration abilities on your back bar. So if we look at something like Winter's Revenge, it only lasts for 12 seconds. Well, that means we're going to have to bar swap to our back bar quite often. Maybe we want to put this on our front bar. And if we look at Elemental Susceptibility, well, that lasts for 30 seconds. Well, we could just put that on our back bar instead. And then we have our long duration. So we also have Fetcher Infection, 20 seconds, 18 seconds for Arctic Blast, 25 for our Betty, and only 15 for our Blockade. But because of our Maelstrom staff, which has to do with gear, we want this on our back bar. Now, we have Sub Assault on our front bar, 6 seconds. Definitely want that on our front bar. Our Spamble, we always obviously want that on our front bar. We're going to have to hit our Cliff Racer, which is kind of a pseudo Spamble, fairly often. And it's going to be really important that we get the timing right. So it probably makes sense to have it on our front bar. And again, this is one we could probably swap something out here for something easier to use. But for right now, we'll leave it there. And then we moved our Winter's Revenge. Okay, and we also have our Barb Trap, which lasts for 20 seconds, which is long. Why don't we swap out our Arctic Blast for our Barb Trap? Well, if we look at our Fighters Guild, and we'll actually have to spec into this. Let me grab that. It increases your weapon and spell damage by 3% per Fighters Guild ability slotted. And it says current bonus 0%. It's just because I'm in this menu here. So that's going to increase, just by being on our bar, it's going to increase our weapon and spell damage by 3%. Well, Arctic Blast doesn't do any of that. So there's not really a compelling reason. So we'll leave Barb Trap on our front bar, even though it's a long duration, because we have this passive ability here. And we'll also grab the rest of these since we're running a Fighters Guild ability. Now, we're going to find out, guys, that we're not done. We're not done with this build. We're going to change some stuff out. But roughly what we have here, we always want some source of minor force. So Barb Trap has been the go-to for years and years. So that's why we have it there. Bomba says, I have Winter's Revenge on the back bar and Betty on the front bar, mostly because having all the ice skills next to each other is neat and tidy. Hey, there you go, man. If it works for you, go for it. I mean, the damage loss is going to be pretty small, so it's not the end of the world if it makes things, if it makes you happy. All right, we're going to call this good. Now, for right now, actually, I should spec in all my passives here, actually. Alchemy, we want medicinal. You got to make sure you have medicinal use, guys. Otherwise, your potions bonuses don't last the whole time. Are we going to use any of these skills? Probably not. Are we going to use any of these skills? Maybe, but not for right now. Okay, so looking pretty good, I think. Do we need skill tracker? Sorry. No, we don't need any of these. Okay, cool. Mage's Guild, right now we don't need any of these, so that's fine. All right, I think we're going to hit confirm. Now, here's the thing. We haven't looked. What's changed since the last time we did one of these builds? Scribing. So we need to go look at some scribing skills and see what we can put in here, because I bet there's going to be some awesome choices. And part of this is somewhat contrived, guys, because I actually played around with this when scribing first came out. I just haven't had time to make a build. I've gotten a lot better and a lot faster at making builds over time, so hopefully they'll continue to come out a lot faster. All right. So let's go in here. One of the things, too, that makes making builds in ESO so hard is that, just like we saw with, like, our ice wall of elements, right? So, like, it providing that what does it say? Reducing armor. So, one of the sweatier players in the game, who's also a creator, and, people routinely say he's, like, the best tank in the game. I don't think there's really any metrics. I'm sure he's very good. He's very good. Best in the game, like there's no metrics to whatever. Okay, very good tank, right? Sure, let's say he's the best in the game. He didn't know that how this interaction worked with Brittle, where with Chilled, okay? And the reason is because ESO doesn't explain it. And even when it says something, to be sure, you have to go check. And so there's so many things that it makes builds so difficult to have to go check that the thing works the way it says it's going to work, because tons of things do not. And so it makes it really hard to do accurate, in-depth builds. And sometimes we get stuff wrong because it's just a complete mess. And you know what? We're happy to do it, but it's a problem, and it slows down builds being made. And if you want to make them at a reasonable pace, you're almost always going to have some kind of errors like this, because, again, the way the game works or doesn't work the way it says it should, and having incomplete tooltips and what have you. So go easy on people when they miss stuff like this. Don't rake anybody over the coals. It's just unfortunate, just kind of the way it is. Call sign Lobo says, Stanmark really helped teach me a lot in making builds, as in saving most of your primary resources for spambles, so most dots, buffs being other resource. Yeah. The dual meta is like, you just got to have some of a different kind, and really whatever your spamble, if it costs magic or stamina, that really defines what kind of build you have, because you'll need that to be the same as your primary resource. Otherwise you'll run out for sure. Okay. So let's take a look here. Now, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay on time, but we're a little bit behind. So a couple of things here. We're going to look at Elemental Explosion, and you can see that, hey, we can do frost damage. That's cool. We can do lingering frost damage. What are our other options here? So we can apply status effects. We can create an area that will charm people, and if they're not charmed, we get magic recovery. Don't really need it, hopefully. Restore Magicka upon hit with Druid's Resurgence. We can reduce movement, we can immobilize enemies, do more damage, or War Mage's defense here. We get a damage shield. Okay, so we probably want to do damage, so we'll go with Lingering Torment. And then we have an option for our affix. The affix is, I think, where most people get confused on scribing because they don't know where they get all these things from or if they want it or need it or what have you. So a brittle, applies brittle. We're always going to be applying brittles, so we probably don't need this, but it's interesting to note. Minor Cowardice reduces their damage done. That's not our responsibility. We don't really need that. Minor Defile reduces healing received. That's a PvP thing. Lifesteal. Group content, this is usually on a target because Magicka damage procs this ability or this lifesteal on a target. And in solo content, it's just not enough for it to matter. So we're not really worried about it. Magicka Steel also passives will proc this. We don't really need it. It just helps our recoveries. We're gonna be fine on recovery. We'll figure out other ways. We don't need to waste our affix on this. Off balance. Now, in group content, ideally someone else is doing this. However, so far we have needed none of these. So like brittle's like vaguely interesting, but not really because that actually brittle's not interesting because we're already gonna have it. So off balance could be nice for solo content. And this is a AoE. It's actually a really giant AoE. So we'll put a pin in this one. Brutality and Sorcery. We would normally get this in group content from a DK using their igneous weapons. In solo content, usually we'll drink potions for it. So we kind of don't need it there. If we didn't want to do that, it is a source, so that we could note that. If we don't have it, if we don't get this from some skills have this as a passive, so duly noted there. Then we have Innervation. So Minor Innervation reduces critical damage. That's a PvP thing. PvE enemies don't critical. And then we have Savagery and Prophecy, which increases our weapon and spell critical. This is the other buff you would typically get from potions, but you can also get from other skills. Bomba says Betty gives Brutality and Sorcery. There you go. Brutality and Sorcery. If we leave our Betty on our bar, we're not going to need this too. Okay, cool. So maybe if we didn't want to run potions, we could run Savagery and Prophecy. If we don't get this from some other location, which we might. We got to take a look. So probably off balance, which is probably why I chose it, is why we have it here. Off balance and solo content will be really nice to have. We'll really want that, and it'll save us from having to change our CP. So that's pretty cool. Now, one thing I want to do real quick, guys. So certain skills you'll find will scale differently. So that they won't really show. You know what? Maybe it's menus. Just to make sure that we're doing an apples to apples comparison. Oh, not you. I want to talk to Tithis. Oh gosh, Tithis. There we go. I want to slot like some basic gear. Just basic gear. It doesn't need to be meta. I just want some basic gear so we have kind of an apples to apples comparison. Things should be scaling properly. We've also got Frostbite already on. That's going to affect our frost damage. We don't necessarily want that. So maybe we'll break the 5-piece set here because we don't necessarily want that unless you throw on like an ice staff of some sort. Oh, that's the only one we have. Okay, we'll drop one of our pieces. Let me see. We'll find something here. Maybe we'll grab. Oh my gosh, I need to walk away from her. Tithis. Maybe we have whirl. Maybe we have whirl. Yeah, we got some whirl here. Let's grab that, and that'll give us kind of an apples to apples comparison. It's funny we all call it whirl, and they thought we were going to all call it depths. I think that's funny. They've mentioned that they think about what we're going to name things. They say that, but I don't think they do. If they do, they don't do a great job of it. All right, so there we go. So we've got a staff. You know what? We could also, do we have Maelstrom? Do we have a Maelstrom staff? So that we have our back bar. We don't have it on us. Let's see if we got one in the bank. It might be on another character. Yeah, we don't have one. It's on a different character. All good. Lobo says, I'm cheapo on pots, so definitely using Betty and using trash pots. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it can save you. After a while, like money doesn't matter. Gold doesn't matter in ESO, so it's kind of like whatever. All right, so we already have our elemental. So the interesting thing about this ability, let me just show you guys, is look at it. It's an insane do you see how big that area is? So I've already tested this, and I assume it hasn't changed much, but we would need to confirm since launch of scribing, is that this ability does a little bit less than our normal spammable. And it's channeled, takes 2 seconds to cast, so that's pretty different. But I mean, you see that massive area. One of the detriments of the Brittleden playstyle is that it was really single target focused. And if we had an AoE fight, you didn't have something. Well, this definitely changes all that, right? Like it's just a massive, massive area. So I think this is a viable strat for AoE fights, or if you're solo and you're running around Overland, Endless Archive. I mean, those ads spawn so far away from each other. Having a spammable that can hit them is pretty cool. Now, one thing you'll notice is that, like, let me just show this. So this does about 5,000 damage up front, and this does almost 10,000, a little bit less. But it takes 2 seconds to cast, so it's a 2-second channeled spammable. So it does more damage, but it takes longer to cast. It ends up doing a little bit less per second than our single target spammable, but that's kind of fair, right? If you're going to hit 2 targets, though, you just doubled the damage that this AoE ability would do. And so it's going to become the best thing there. Saying whirl is just too hard for me, Luna says. That's fair. Luna's native language is either Quechua or Portuguese, I assume. Is that right, Luna? So it might be a little bit hard, but whirl is kind of weird, yeah. Oh, somebody's using a Hack the Minotaur heavy attack guide in one of my guilds. Please don't do that. It makes no sense. Gosh. Okay, so people are asking about it. So here we go. This could be our AoE spammable. Luna, also good to see you. Welcome in. So this could be our AoE Portuguese. Okay, yeah. I feel my tongue getting all rolled around itself to say those words. That's funny. Cool. So this could be something we swap in for AoE. Now, on our previous Brittleden builds, one of the things we've used is the Master's Destro Staff on our front bar. And let me just pull that up for you guys. That typing it in didn't really help. Okay, so whenever we cast Destructive Touch, which is our spammable that we had, it will it'll increase our weapon and spell damage by, I think it's like 600 if you have it golded out for 4 seconds. So it's a very short duration buff, but it's 600 is a lot. And then the 2 item for the perfected is another 100 weapon and spell damage. So basically 700 weapon and spell damage from our using a Master's Ice Staff. Now, if we use the AoE, right, like if we use our destructive or chilling explosion here, we can't use that because we're not going to get the buff. So that is something that is kind of unfortunate, that maybe we don't want to use that setup on our new Brittleden. So something we'll have to keep in mind. Luna says, I think Chilling Explosion is pretty decent for some trash fights where you can precast it during the 3-2-1. Yeah, that's fair. Well, I mean, in theory, it should also be fine as a spammable once you have everything else out. Don't you think, Luna? I've parsed with this on a single target fight, just so everybody knows, and I lost a few K damage, but it wasn't crazy. So it's actually like decent as a spammable. There's also the damage over time, which again, just like our other, destructive reach, is not gonna, like, we're gonna be recasting it more often than that. So that's cool. What else do we have? Well, the rest of these things are weapon skills, and we're only using a destruction staff, so we don't really need to look at them. We could, but I don't think we need to, and I don't think it would be thematically fun. We also like running the Ice Staff, right? Because of the survivability, and if we're going to be running Endless Archive, we really like that. Luna says the damage is definitely there, but what I mean is that if you use it as a precast, you get the best of both worlds. Absolutely, Luna. And actually, we're going to have a really cool interaction that you can use with it as well, specifically for this Warden, for that same thing. And then Bombas says Sub-Assault, Explosion, Cliff Racer would also let you start the fight with 4 times spell power buff. Yeah, because we're automatically going to set everybody off balance, and then we get that spell buff. The thing with the Cliff Racer is that, like, it does boost. Hey, what's up, chicken? It does boost our weapon and spell damage, but it's also, like, depending on the AoE fight, like, it might not be worth it. It might be better to just do an ability that does damage. I don't know, but it's a good idea, Bombas. It's something worth. You would have to test it in content, or you could test it on dummies. You can test AoE builds on dummies, but it would be really interesting. I would be very curious to know how that worked out. How you would do that, guys, is you would just practice on a group of like lower health mobs, go into your normal opening, and then like kill them after 10 seconds. If you think that's how long or however long you think your trash fights are going to last, you just kill them. You keep casting like you would. And then once you think, okay, everybody would have killed everything by now, even though your mobs will have more health, you kill them with F5 or whatever. And then you can see how your damage did. That's how you can test out. Chicken says, watching Modern Family with my sandwich maker. Hope to review this later. Okay, cool, man. Cool. Well, thanks for saying hi. Cool. So, what other abilities? We have Soul Burst over here. Soul Burst has frost damage. Okay, that's interesting. 4,200. That's about what our burst damage is on some of our abilities. Let's see what else we got. So yeah, let's say frost. I mean, we could look at what else we have here, but we really want frost damage, so that's cool. We have, what do we got? Acolyte's Potency gives us a bit of ultimate. Class Mastery is not good on a Warden for DPS. Snare them, we don't need that. Sage's Remedy to heal, we don't really need to heal. Acolyte's Cruelty, do some Oblivion damage. Okay, and then that's a PvP thing for the Oblivion damage because it can't be shielded or blocked. I know, I know from playing ESO too much that usually when something does Oblivion damage, it's usually just for PvP. The total damage it causes is usually less than other abilities. You do want to check that, but usually it's less, but all of the damage goes to their health. And then this also has a built-in execute. It could be interesting, but again, probably for PvP. Every once in a while, we need to double check that things haven't changed, but I think probably for PvP, just so you guys know. And then remove a negative effect, which we don't care about. And then we have Lingering Torment, which provides damage over time. So I would say that, like, if this was our spammable, maybe the damage over time doesn't matter. But I think here, it's not going to be our spammable. So let's do the damage over time. Luna says Oblivion damage is perfect for mechanical acuity stacks. Oh, okay. How so? Like, what's the interaction there, Luna, that I'm missing that makes it good? So then we also have Breach. We don't need Breach. We have Courage, Minor Courage, which is what I chose here. We'll see if that's useful. Also, I should note that because of our we're choosing a damage on our focus, that this buff is just going to be for us. It's not going to be for anybody else. Oh, Luna says Oblivion could never crit. So you keep getting stacks even above 100% and every 2 seconds. Oh, okay. That's really cool. So for those who don't know, on mechanical acuity, you build up stacks and then it procs. And a lot of times you actually want to build up stacks slower rather than faster. And so because like you want the buff of the set, which we're not going into right now, to last for longer. So she's saying that, like, okay, having something that won't crit is a good idea. Okay, so you extend the duration of mechanical acuity for some pretty decent force. Okay, cool. That's a really niche, that's like pro tip there. That's like super niche, but good to know. I did not know that, Luna. Thanks for passing on that info. Okay, so we could also get Expedition. We probably don't need it. Interrupt enemies. We probably don't need it. Magic of Steel. We don't need it. Minor Maim. We don't need it. Our Brittle applies Minor Maim as just a byproduct, so we're always going to have Minor Maim on our opponents, so we don't need that. We'll probably also usually have, I think, Major Maim from our Reach, right? I think we will. I can't remember. I know the Clench does it. Maybe it's just Clench. We'll have to look. Resolve. Minor Resolve could be, I mean, that'll make us more survivable. We might put a pin in Minor Resolve. That could be useful. Brutality and Sorcery. We kind of already went over this. Savagery and Prophecy. Oops, we already also went over, right? We might have other this could be one of our sources, but right now. And then Intellect and Endurance, which will increase our recoveries by 15%. Minor Intellect and Minor. That's actually pretty interesting as well. And then we have Courage. So what I would say here, the three things that stick out to me is, first off, in a group content, we're not going to need any of these, okay? So this is really solo content, and it's only going to apply to us anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So for group content, this doesn't matter. I'm going to be honest with you. It just doesn't matter what we choose. For solo content, we're not going to have minor courage. So extra weapon and spell damage. That's pretty cool. For resolve would be for like more survivability. And then intellect would be for, and endurance would be for sustain. So it's more damage, more survivability, or more sustain. Pick your poison. I went with more damage. All right, that's what I'm going to go with here. If we were going really far into the Endless Archive, having minor resolve would be very important. There's other places we could get it, but this could be a really good one. So maybe for going really far in the archive, we'd want to go with resolve. For right now, I'm going to go with courage, which I already did. Okay. Now let's compare these skills, okay? So that was Mage's Guild. And we need to make sure that we have all the passives here. And I will note that reduces magicka cost of abilities by 15%, increases their duration. We want that. And then this would increase our max magicka and recoveries for each Mage's Guild ability slotted. Man, it would be really nice to have that. I just don't have Mage's Guild at a high enough level. And this would also make it where we probably want to front bar this skill. Whatever we happen to choose here. Oh, we haven't even got there. I skipped ahead. I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead. We're talking about soul magic. I'm skipping ahead. I'm cheating. So Chilling Burst. Hopefully pretend like you didn't see anything. Chilling Burst. This is all from like 9 months ago, I think, guys. So just keep that in mind. All right. So here's our Chilling Burst. Let's compare this to one of our other skills here. So maybe one of our dots. Let's look at our back bar. Maybe compare this to like Arctic Blast. Yeah, so, or maybe compare it to, we know our Fetcher is really good because the second cast is going to do 60% more damage. That's crazy. So it does 7,800 magic damage over 20 seconds. Okay, we're going to ignore the second cast for right now. So how much does this do? So this deals upfront 2.8k frost damage, and then another 4.8k over 20 seconds. So one of the things you want to look at, hey Emmett, doing well, man, doing well, just in the weeds here on this build. So one of the things you want to look at with a skill, an ability, is how much damage every time you hit a button. Okay, so let's say a fight lasts for an infinite amount of time. Okay, you're going to be fighting forever. What matters for doing damage? Well, the limiting factor then is that you can only press one skill per second. So really what you want to look at is every time I press a button, how much damage does that do? That's really what matters, because the duration is always going to tick down. Now, in practical applications, that's not always true, but we can deal with that later. Let's assume the fight is an infinitely long fight. How much damage when I press a button does it do? Because that's really the difference. Because if the alternative is to use our spammable as the filler. So if our spammable is good and does really good damage, then keeping up our dots, we just fill in with our spammable. So total damage here is going to be a little bit over 7,000. Okay, so actually a decent amount over 7,000. That's going to be like 7,600, 7,800. Okay. And that's just me doing math in my head. Okay, guys, you could add this up on a calculator. If we look at this Fetcher, it does 7,800. So these do about the same damage. Now, remember, the Fetcher is a class skill, so it has other bonuses. Minor Vuln, also the second cast deals 60% more damage. So no way we would want to swap out our Fetcher infection for Chilling Burst. But maybe one of our other skills we do. Is there something else we could swap this out with? I'm not sure. I mean, we kind of like most of our skills. We'd have to go through. I bet Winter's Revenge is going to be something that does more damage. We would have to go through and do the calculations on all these. That's something I'll do offline. But what we're going to find out here is I think that we kind of would like to put this on our bar, but I don't know if anything makes sense to swap out. Maybe our Cliff Racer, if that bonus damage doesn't do it for us, the bonus weapon and spell damage. It could certainly be here if we wanted to simplify our build and make this just a plain dot. Absolutely could swap it out there. Maybe it does more damage than elemental susceptibility. That could be an option. The problem is this costs magicka too, so it's going to be really expensive, whereas Elisus is free. Maybe it's better than the 5% increased damage. We can test all those things out, but we have an interesting skill here, is what I'll say about it. Let's see what else we got. And if we wanted all ice damage for like thematic reasons, we could absolutely swap out one of our non-ice abilities for one that is just pure ice. Okay. And then another thing, if we do decide that we want to run something like Frostbite, Frostbite is an interesting set here. Let me get a drink of water. I have a Dragonite tank build that needs to be updated, but you could start there, Emmett, on the channel. Yeah. And you know what? If you're looking for the skills, the card should be updated and it should be on the website. Yeah, so you can go there and see what skills I would recommend on it, and that'll be current. Same with all the tanking classes right now. All right, where were we? So Frostbite. So Frostbite does 3 things for the 5-piece bonus. It increases the damage done with all of our frost abilities by 8%, worth noting. Increases your damage done against chilled enemies by 4%. Enemies are always going to be chilled. Our enemies are always going to be chilled. And it also does another 2% damage to enemies that are afflicted with minor brittle. Also going to be all of our enemies. So we're always going to get 6% increased damage from this set. Now that's interesting, because if we look at Onsoul's, it does 7%. Just off the rip. Okay, so this is a trial set, so that's interesting. So it's not as good as Onsoul's, but then it gives us 8% increased damage to our frost abilities. Well, it depends how many frost abilities we have. I think what we're going to find is that Frostbite is still not quite as good as as our other options, but it might be a really good like second there. So something to keep in mind. If we went full ice with all of our skills as much as we could, that would mean that all of our skills were getting buffed by this set by 14%. 14% is what Onsoul gives at its peak, which it makes it pretty much one of the best sets in the game if you're constantly proccing it. Okay. That means that if we have all ice skills, then Frostbite was probably comparable to one of the best sets in the game, assuming we still have another trial set and a few other things. But what are the chances we're going to do that? Probably not very high. This will give us that 8% bonus to our frost damage, but remember that this is a non-frost skill, but if we cast it again, it's 60% more damage. 60%, much greater than 8%. So we want to use all frost skills, but still Fetcher is just too good. And if we say it's every 2 casts, we could just say, well, it does effectively 30% more if you average it out. 30%, still much greater than 8%. Luna says, I remember doing a ton of math to prove Elisus is super above average on Magden to one of my raid leaders. Okay. Just because the chilled sinus effect. I would love to know that math, Luna. If you have it, copy paste it, send it to me. I'd love to know what math you did, because I would have to figure that out. I don't even know where to start exactly. I mean, figure out how much the status effects proc for damage, add that up over the time, and I guess come up with a number. But yeah, that's still a lot of math, I'm assuming, is what you did there. Okay. Well, we're in a situation, again, like Subterranean Assault. So how much does this do? Well, it does, each time we press a button, it does like 12,600 damage. So that's going to be a lot more than these other skills that are doing like 7.8k versus 12 something, right? 8% more damage on these skills is not going to make us want to replace Subterranean Assault. Okay, so we could replace this if we just want a pure ice build, but it's not going to actually make sense from a damage standpoint. So keep that in mind. And that's one of those things where you'll see like, oh, it's a frost build, right? And they'll just go, I mean, it's pretty easy to just throw in all frost skills. You can do that. And if it's fun for you, and if you're not worried about maximum damage, there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to be just fine doing overland, doing solo content with that kind of a build. Don't let me discourage you if that's what you want. But for group content, you always want to bring the most damage because that's what's best for the group. And so there's a situation, if you do enough damage that you're not being carried by the rest of the group, it also is totally fine. And you could do that with totally ice skills. I don't think we're going to do that. I prefer being a little bit more optimal just for my personal preference. So that's what we're going to do that. That's what we're going to do here. What up, Where Moogle? He says how to make DPS build. Hit buttons and don't die. Oh man. Where Moogle? Hey, this video that we're doing, we're gonna do one for your DK healer, I think, as well. So this was the other requested build that we got from the channel members, man. So just FYI, and I mentioned to you a little bit earlier. So okay. We've got that Chilling Burst. Again, if you wanted pure, just all the ice damage, this would be a great skill. I mean, it still does a decent amount of damage. So something to keep in mind. Is that right? Yeah, it actually, I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. This does more than I thought. Hold on. This does like 11K. Oh, that's pretty good. 11K? Yeah. So it's almost as good as some of our really hooked up. No, this would be just fine. This would be just fine to run. You're going to lose a little bit of damage, but if you want a pure ice build, I might do that. I might make just like I don't want to do it on this because I want my Brittleden to stay like a meta setup, a good setup, or an optimal setup is I guess what I want to say, not good. But yeah, that actually did more damage than I thought. Never mind. I was wrong. This would be where it's really expensive. I don't know how we're going to afford all the mag costs and all these skills, but you could absolutely run that and we'd be pretty hooked up. And if we think about averaging out our Fetcher infection, so some casts it'll do 60% more damage. We said on average it'll do 30% more. So we could just take its total damage here. And again, these numbers will change based on your gear and everything else. But if we just say that it does like 7,800 damage and we multiply that times 1.3, wait, hold on. I think it's worth swapping out Chilling Burst for our Fetcher. Now the minor vuln, we need minor vuln. So we're not going to do that. But in group content, if we don't need minor vuln, it would make sense. And we also want to keep our pets because otherwise Lyriel will get upset. What do we got here? All good things. DK healer hype. We'll have to go back and watch stream when it drops. Yeah, I will for sure, man. How powerful is your build? I mean, I'm not sure if you're talking to me or Where Moogle there. I feel like you're talking to Where Moogle. Cake Man says, step 1, Oaken Soul. Step 2, Profit. Yeah, man. Oaken Soul is good. I don't think Oaken Soul is as good as everybody makes it out to be. In solo content, I would much, much rather... So the trick for all the sweaty in-game players, how we do all the solo content, is we run Ring of the Pale Order. And if you can do a bunch of damage, then you'll never die except for the one-hits. It works really well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I have Oaken Soul builds, but a lot of people, I think, overvalue. You can get a lot of those buffs from other sources. Now, on certain builds, it makes sense. It's a 1-bar thing. I even recommended it on my one of my recent builds. But also, if you're solo, I think it's better to lose a few buffs, but have the infinite healing that you get, being healed up to full health every second by running Ring of the Pale Order. That's just my 2 pennies. For group content, again, it's totally fine to run. You get most of those buffs in group content from your group if they're optimized, and so its utility there goes down quite a bit, and so it doesn't do as much. So it's kind of in a weird place. Like it's totally fine for certain play styles. If you're getting healed enough with shields and everything else, it'll work great. Eventually, depending on what kind of content you're running, you'll get to a point where you're taking more damage than you can shield through. And then the only thing that will keep you alive is Ring of the Pale Order. And so it just stops working at a certain point. But yeah, it's good. It's really good. I just think that sometimes people overvalue it a bit. Lobo says, Oaken Soul is what I used to put on any class I don't like enough to learn a kit out properly. There you go. And a lot of the time I think about running something. This is Cake Man. And a lot of time I think about running something and then I realize it's just duplicating Oaken Soul buffs. Yeah, well, that's the whole thing, Cake Man, is that you can basically get those buffs and then you can run something else instead of Oaken Soul, like Ring of the Pale Order, and then you get, max damage. So, whatever works for you, man. It can be good. A lot of people think that like it's the best thing since sliced bread, and it makes the game easier because I can look at Oaken Soul and I can say, here's where we can get all those buffs. Sure. That you have to theory craft, you got to know a lot about the game and what have you, and it's a lot easier. Like Lobo said, is just to like throw it on and forget about it for sure. And there are some builds where you don't have the bar space, you want a simple 1 bar build. That makes Oaken Soul builds a lot better. Is like they're better on one. Obviously, it's got to be a 1 bar build, but like if you can run 2 bars, you can get a lot more buffs. Anyways, there's a lot to be said there. I won't go into it anymore, but it's really good. I think that for me, I love Pale Order, and so I would rather run that if I can. And you can do 1 bar builds without Oaken Soul Ring, and people don't. I don't know if a lot of people kind of realize that it doesn't compute for them. Where Moogle said use that I mentioned, I was him asking about. I'm so confused. You said you mentioned me, so I was asking if it was all good things. Oh, okay, man. I'm sorry. I can't read. Um, Pale Order plus siphoning attacks sounds OP. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all good things, Wary Moogle. I was just talking about that you were one of the people that one of the channel members, man, who requested a build, and I'm excited about doing it. Luna says Oaken Soul heavy attack build on Warden is incredibly efficient, honestly. And last time I was testing it, it was super strong. It was stronger than a Sork heavy attack build. Okay. Bomba says, if Velothi Urmage still good on Magden? Yes. Urmage Amulet is good in a lot of places, man. So, yeah. I'm not sure what exactly is best right now, but it's got to be up there. It's got to be pretty close. We're talking like a few K damage if it's not the best thing. Okay. Well, Chilling Burst. I'm sorry. So, we're doing the math here. We took the damage that we would typically get from our fetcher, and what we realized is like Chilling Burst would be better. I think. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. No. Okay, so that was front, but we just don't have anything on our back bar. Let me see. What would this say on our front bar? Yeah. Okay, so now we're comparing 11.4K with 11.6K. So yeah, our fetcher is still going to be better. Fetcher's still going to be better. But if we wanted all ice, Chilling Burst would be an option. Let's see what else we can get here. We want to keep moving along. Wield Soul. Okay. So here I have magic damage. Can you do frost damage? Okay, you can do frost damage. We can do Lingering Torment. I'm just going to quickly look through all these because they're all the same stuff we looked through. Yeah, Lingering Torment would be the way to go. We could apply Breach. We don't really need to. We could apply Cowardice. We don't really need. I mean, that will reduce damage. Defiles PvP. Maim reduces damage taken by 10%. Could be good for the archive at some point. Could be useful. Actually, we could also just use our taunt for reduced damage. So maybe not as our spamble. Resolve. We don't need. We probably use a different skill. There's some interesting choices here. I don't think any of them are super compelling, is what I would say. We don't need Breach, that's for sure, though. That's just like the I don't know why I had Breach there. Probably didn't have some of this other stuff. I would say, oh man, increases your healing received and damage shields. I'd have to think about this more. I think Maim is kind of interesting, but depending on if we could get this from our Frost Reach, then we wouldn't need it. I can't remember if Reach does it or if it's just Clench. We'll have to look. Vitality could also be really good just because the increased healing if we're running Pale Order for solo content. Cowardice, Major Cowardice could also be really good for I would probably say Cowardice for running in the Endless Archive. Having a source of Major Cowardice is really helpful there. So this is probably what I would say run. And this is good damage. I mean, this is decent. Now, is there a place to put it on our bar? I don't know. Let's see. We're going to craft this. Yeah. I mean, there's not a place to put it on our bar. We definitely know that. But does our Frost Clench, or Reach rather, does it apply? Okay, no, this does not apply Major Maim. So we would need some other source of Major Maim for the Endless Archive for maximum damage mitigation. But that's another skill there if you wanted pure ice skills. And the damage on it is good. Now we have Torchbearer. We're not going to be using this. It's channel 2 seconds. We don't want to mess with it. Our banner. So the problem with banners is usually it's made or broken by our class mastery, and the other thing that really sucks about the banner is that if you look up here, there is no ice damage. There is no ice damage because Zoss hates us. No, I don't know. But there's not ice damage, so we're not going to run it. Our class mastery sucks, so we're probably not going to run the banner on a warden. There isn't a real compelling reason to do it. We could run, we could do something with this, but I don't think it's going to make a lot of sense. Trample also doesn't have ice damage. Oh no, it does have ice damage. Oh, okay. Oh, it does. All right. Well, maybe Trample's okay. What else we got here? It's a second and a half channel, so I don't know. I don't know about all that, but we could do Lingering Torment. That's actually pretty hooked up. And then if we ran like Heroism, yeah, this is major heroism, and we could also run. Now we got protection from another source. This could be pretty hooked up. Generate a ton of ultimate. Do we need that much ultimate? I mean, it can't hurt, right? Probably can't hurt. This wouldn't be bad. This is what I would run. I don't want to save this because I think these stave across specs. And on my healer, I would not run this. I would run heroism, but I'd probably run. Is there anything else I could run here? Maybe I would run this on my healer, actually. Hold on. Let me see. Yeah, I would run this on my healer. Assassin's Misery is the only other thing I'd run. So I'd do Lingering Torment. Yeah, I'd run this on my healer. Okay, we'll make this. We'll make it. Let me catch up on that chat. There are definitely more builds on 2-bar than 1-bar. 1-bar is on 2. Why is that Knight? Emmett, the reason that is the way it is, man, is because you just do more damage on 2 bars, and there's also some utility. Sometimes you just run out of bar space on a 1-bar build, so it does more damage and you have more utility. So if you are comfortable using a 2-bar, they're better. But like the nice thing about a 1-bar build, and I have plenty here on the channel of 1-bar builds, is that they're really simple. They're really easy. I've done Warden, I've done a Brittleden 1-bar build, and they'll parse maybe like 10 or 15k less than a 2-bar build, but they'll still do enough damage. The thing is, for people that are not ready for a 2-bar build, that like a 2-bar build is too complicated, they'll actually do more damage on a 1-bar build than they would on a 2-bar build because they get confused on what buttons they're pressing and it's just too much for them. So having a 1-bar build will allow them to actually do more damage. And it's a good place to start for most people. And I don't think that there's a lot of sweaty people that I don't think realize that that's the case. I have seen that in practice though, so I know it's the case for a lot of people. Lobo said, sorry to get off topic with this build, but while we were discussing Pale Order, it seems good, but many builds seem to use it as a cure-all, assuming you always have enemies to hit or never stunned. So Lobo, the trick with that is to apply a lot of dots. Dots are really good on Ropo, so if you're running a Ropo build, you might add in an extra dot that you wouldn't otherwise have for solo content, so you can dot up different targets. AoE dots are even better, and so that even if you get stunned, you're still getting healed that way, and that'll keep you alive. But yeah, there are situations where you can't hit anybody. Yeah, and that does become a problem. Absolutely. And sometimes you need a slot of self-heal. Those are usually the exception, though, not the rule. And what you have to do, you have to learn to use Ropo well, because you have to learn how to do that. You have to learn, like, oh, I got to get my dots down immediately so that I can get my healing going. And let me always keep down my wall of elements. Let me always keep down these various skills. And so your rotation changes a little bit, and then how you DPS, how you open fights and stuff also will change a little bit. But yeah, it can be a problem. It's a very high risk, high reward play style is what I would say. So it's difficult. So it's not for everybody, which is why I say that like the sweaty in-game players will often do that, because they're used to that play style. They're fine with the high risk, high reward. And hey, it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you die because of it. Certainly I have, but yeah, that's the idea. Also, I'm glad Emmett was asking me. My current build is a healer with a werewolf ult on the front bar. Okay. Oh yeah, where Moogle's been playing around with like a weird, like off meta, no resto staff healer. Okay. Haven't had time to update it since the new stuff dropped. Okay. Cool. All right. We'll catch you later. Where Moogle. All right. Now the last thing and I've saved this for the last. We have Ulfsild's Contingency. This is an excellent shield if you're going for pure survivability, but we're going for pure damage. So we got frost damage on it. That's awesome. We've also got Lingering Torment. Again, most of these other things are essentially things we don't need, and I won't run through all of them. We've done that quite a bit. They're a little bit different here, but still. Now, we'll start at the bottom. Savagery, we've talked about. Protection, we can get somewhere else. Although this could be nice, but we're using this for a damaging ability. But we can get minor protection elsewhere. Intellect and Endurance, a lot of places we've seen we can get that from scribing, although it's still nice. Innervation is a PvP thing. Brutality and Sorcery, we've already talked about. Vulnerability, afflicts minor vuln. So this could replace our Fetcher, but again, it's such a good skill, we probably don't want to. But if we wanted to go with an all ice build, maybe we would switch and put minor vuln on this. And then we could swap out our Fetcher and go with a purely thematic ice build. Probably I will do that if I make a pure ice build just for the fun. Then we've got Minor Resolve, which we talked about, we probably don't need. Magic Seal we don't need. Breach we don't need. And then we've got Force. Well, we need this, but we normally get it from our trap. But wait, this is ice damage. Well, what if we did this? How would that compare? Let's look. So, Chilling Contingency, we'll just swap it here so they're both here on our front bar. So this does about total, each time we cast it, our Chilling Contingency does about, what is that, 11, almost 12,000 damage. Okay, and it provides minor force. Well, what does Barb Trap do? Well, it does, what do you know? It does about 12,000 damage and provides minor force. Huh. Well, now, and this is true for all classes, guys, now we have an option for swapping out. And instead of running passes for the Fighters Guild, we can run passes for the Mages Guild. So now, and this is an AoE. So now we have an AoE ability that provides us with minor force. Man, that's hooked up. If we need minor force, if we're not getting it from the Velothi Mage Amulet, which we might be, this could be really hooked up. That's interesting. That's really interesting. So if we have the Velothi Mage Amulet, it provides minor force, and there's other places we can get it. But man, that might be it. Well, for now, we're going to swap this out. Now, if we have the Velothi Mage Amulet, like we could also swap out. We don't need that force. We could maybe swap out with the Soul Magic, or something else. But I think that this might be our bar for our Warden. I think this might be it. Now, again, maybe we change Chilling Soul, Chilling Burst in for Cliff Racer here. If we feel like the extra weapon and spell damage isn't as good as some of these other things, which, again, if we want a source of major cowardice in the Infinite Archive, we would 100% swap out this skill for the reduced damage because we want to play it safe in the Endless Archive. But then if we wanted maximum damage like in a trial or something, maybe we run Cliff Racer. Or if we just want an easier build, maybe we stick with Chilling Soul. If we want AoE, we could swap in Chilling Burst here, and that would work quite well. And then we could kind of use this as like our AoE spec or something. So we've got several options here. Now, what are we going to decide on, and what are we ultimately going to do? I don't know. I got to parse some, and I got to think about it. I got to check the numbers and go through everything. But I think something like this is probably what we'll end up with on our final Brittleden build, the new updated one. All right, now we've gone a little bit, we're getting close to time here. Let's talk about CP. So for blue CP, this is where most of our damage comes from. And ideally what you do is you take all the stuff you can that you don't have to slot, right? You just grab it and you slot it. If you don't have enough, typically what you do is you figure out where you want to go with the CP, like what CP you want slottable, and buy out towards that CP, right? Pretty simple. Get the CP you can. If you don't have enough, that's okay. It just is what it is. It's not really a big deal. But if you have enough to buy all the passives, you just go ahead and buy them. So we'll kind of do that here. And I think that we'll have most of them. There are some damage mitigation passives, which are, if you're going for maximum damage, you could skip these to start off with. So we'll grab it. I have plenty of CP, so that's what I'm doing. Just everything that's not slottable. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Cool. And then most of these other ones are slottable. I just know, guys, because I've played around with this stuff enough, where all these are at. These are all slottable, slottable, slottable. And usually once you hit a slottable area, like all these up here are all going to be slottable. Okay. And same thing down here. All these are going to be slottable. So once you get to a point, like everything beneath it, and same thing out here, right? All these are going to be slottable. This is DPS, this is tanking, this is healing. These are just kind of random, and then these are also a bit of random, and DPS. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, depending on what kind, if we have a situation, we have to figure out, is thaumatology, deadly aim, master at arms, or biting aura, what's better? Well, if more of our attacks are area of effect than not, then biting aura is good because it's area of effect. If more of our damage are damage over time versus direct damage, then master at arms is good versus dot damage, right? Thaumaturge, if more of our damage is damage over time than direct damage, then something like thaumaturge is good, okay? And basically what you need to do is you need to do a parse, figure out where your damage is coming from. Is it more single target? Is it more whatever? And typically what you can do, I don't have a parse to pull. Let me see if I have anything saved that I can bring up. Will it bring up old fights? Yeah, here we go. So what you can do here, and I know this is a little, can I expand this maybe? There we go. Hopefully this is large enough. So what you can do here, let me see if I can get it even bigger. Yeah, there we go. So what you can do here is like, this is on my Nightblade, right? I'm looking at a Nightblade parse, but surprise attack, single target, direct damage. Okay, so you could go down and you could say, hey, direct damage. Okay, here's how much DPS I got from that, right? And you would want to unspec your CP. And you could say, okay, well, 17k damage, put that in the direct damage and also put it in the single target category, okay? And then go down here and add up each one of these and figure out if it's direct damage, if it's damage over time, if it's single target, if it's multi-target, add them up. And then honestly, you really don't need to do every single ability because you see they get smaller and smaller. So what's going to happen is like the main couple of abilities are going to be the most important ones. And if you figure out that like, you know, your top 10 abilities, that more of them are single target, more of them are direct damage, like on a Nightblade, then you want single target and direct damage CP. If you find out that it's something else, then you want different kinds of CP. So just keep that in mind. Now, if we look here, and you think about this, so this is 3% per stage up to 6%. Usually less than half of your damage is going to be of one particular type. So any particular CP is going to give you maybe at most about 3% damage. I think I did the math once and it was like 2 point something, but around 3%. So just realize if you pick the wrong CP, you're losing, or you don't have it at all, you're losing about 3% damage. Roughly, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's how you can kind of figure out for yourself what CP you want to slot. Now, if we look at our build, we see that this is even though this is it's over time, these are 2 direct damage attacks from our shocks. So that's direct damage. Our spammable is also going to be direct damage with a bit of damage over time, and then most of our other skills are going to be damage over time. We'll just have to add it up and figure out where our damage is coming from. I suspect, it really just depends. So I suspect that AoE, I suspect potentially direct damage, because boosting our shocks and our spammable might be our 2 highest damage causing abilities, are probably going to be pretty high up there. And then you can also go with something like if you're in solo overland, fighting finesse to increase your critical strike chance if you're below cap. And then almost always, guys, and we've already seen that we can provide off balance. Exploiter is almost always a good idea. It's a lot of damage in a certain window. It's 10%, but off balance has a lot of off time. But usually Exploiter, if you can at all run it, is usually worth running. And we can always run it now, right? Because we have a way of providing off balance. So we'll have to look through here and figure out what we want to do. Red CP, kind of a choose your own adventure, not really that important. And then gear. We also have to figure out gear. So if we wanted all ice damage, you know, we kind of talked about World of Depths, this ice damage. Why not go with this? Probably Whirl of the Depths with Frostbite would be fun for like a pure thematic build, and we could see how much damage that does. And then for an optimal setup, though, we'll probably go with something else here. I'll just have to look into that a bit more, but that is the gist of it. Do you guys have any questions about what we've done so far and all the stuff we've done to you? Or are there anything that like, hey, I have a question about this and you haven't covered it yet? Throw it out there for me. Emmett says I like Warden as a healer, but I got him set to a DD. Okay, yeah, I mean they're both fine. They both work really well. That's cool with the chilling contingency. It's Mage's Guild, so grants him power. So if you need occasional heavy attacks for sustained, you wouldn't lose as much unless using Velothi. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know you could also like work that into a heavy attack build now with his contingency too. Bomba says explosion greater than barb trap. They're the same, Bombus. It's just that one of them is, it's really the opportunity cost of the other thing. So explosion is going to be an AoE. That's pretty cool. Barb trap is a single target. You don't actually need barb trap, or you don't need minor force in a lot of situations now because of Velothi. So if you're running Velothi, you don't really need it. You usually run Velothi in AoE fights. So again, 6 one way, half a dozen the other. But as Luna was talking about earlier, as you're precasting abilities going into a fight, what you can do is you can precast your contingency here, and then you can cast your chilling explosion, and both will go off at the same time. So you can get a really big burst going into a DPS fight, which is pretty cool. Now the contingency is centered on you, so you do need to be in the thick of things by the time it goes off. But if you're casting early and tanks are like 3, 2, and then you're running in, you can hit them with the big damage there. So kind of cool burst damage thing you can do with the contingency. So, well, I'm not seeing any questions, guys. I'll give you another few minutes here. Hopefully we went through all that and we got everything covered. It's not done. It's not done, but we've got some things to consider that we'll really have to think about. I'll have to try out with a Cliff Racer. If that works, I'll also have to see how hard it is to parse with this, and if I think that's realistic for people to track those intervals. I think even if this is the best thing to do, I think there's going to be some people that it would be better for them not to do this. So we'll have to see there. Gear sets, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff to consider with gear sets. What makes the most sense? I'm not sure if Depths procs Brittle. I assume it does. If it does, this could give us a little bit more damage than it would give most classes, which might make it even more interesting. It can proc in the wrong place, which is problematic, so that could be a detriment. Bombus said, maybe I missed it, but is Whirl and Frostbite still optimal? I don't think Frostbite was ever optimal. It's really good. It's close to optimal. You can use it optimally in trash, I think, because you're using mostly ice damage. They're both still very good, is what I would say, Bombus. For optimal, yeah, we probably want a medium set there, and both those are light, so we'd probably want to do something else. I'm not sure what we want to use for our medium set, to be totally honest with you right now. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Both of those are still really good, though, and are going to be close. And in a lot of ways, the Frostbite will be even better with the new build because there's more ice damage on it. And so that'll increase it, its effectiveness. Oh no! Oh, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to scare you with a lid. Lobo says, I appreciate the stream. Definitely a lot of good info. I'll have to go watch the rest of it as I just got the end. Okay, cool, man. Well, I'm glad you dropped in. Glad it was helpful. All right, guys. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions right now. I bet they'll come up later. Let me know, and I'll be working on this build to get it out. Another thing that we're going to have to run with, or we want to run with, because it was part of the assignment, is that we want a setup that is going to run well with, where is it? Infinite Archive, Warden, Ares Cry. Ares Cry, dealing damage with a light attack applies Eagle's Mark to your target for 12 seconds. Eagle's Mark causes an eagle to attack the target for every 3 seconds after a 3-second delay, dealing 3.2k physical damage. Applying Eagle's Mark grants you Ares Call for 12 seconds, increasing your damage done with Animal Companion abilities by 10% against enemies with Eagle's Mark. That's pretty huge. This effect can occur every 3 seconds, but cannot be applied to enemies who have Eagle's Mark already. you can have one Eagle's mark ability applied at a time. So that's interesting. You know what? I should have looked at that earlier. That might be something where we use Screaming Cliff Racer then as our default um, spammable, so that we can proc that set, because that was requested. It's going to be less than optimal, but it'll probably be fine. It won't be great, but it'll be fine. The difference is, guys, just to give you an idea of like if you're wearing a good set versus a set that does nothing. I've mentioned that Onsol's Torment is a pretty good set. It's not as good as everything else, but we can make a kind of comparison. We're just ignoring the first 5-piece bonuses. We're only looking at like the 5-piece bonus and the kind of the non-perfected too bonus. So this increases our damage by 7%. I can tell you that on Reliquin, you'll get procs. Reliquin will do about 10 to 12k on a full parse. And so the maximum amount of damage you're losing if you have a bad 5-piece set is about 10k. Okay, or about or like a decent set is about 7% of your damage, which you'll find is comparable. Okay, it's not as good as Reli. Reli is only single target too. I should also note that, whereas Onsol's is all of your damage. So there are trade-offs there. If you're doing single target damage, you're going to do more damage. If you're doing AoE, you're going to do obviously more damage because you're hitting more targets, but you're going to do less per target. So just realize that's how much damage you're potentially losing if you pick like a totally, bad set. So even when you do something that's suboptimal, as long as you don't do all of the suboptimal things, like pick bad sets, have suboptimal skills, have, run the wrong kind of armor, so you're not getting all the benefits you would, and there's wasted lines. You're not running the right CP. If you add all those things up, you get tens, 20, 30, 40k damage loss, right? It can add up if you choose everything that's suboptimal. But if you only choose one thing that's suboptimal, it's an incremental loss. So, picking a set that's fun, like running, Frostbite, because it's fun, you get 6% damage increase on a Brittleden, always, which is almost as much as you get from Onsol's Torment. So, and remember, Onsol's Torment you can run anywhere, and it's pretty close to, being one of the best sets. Well, Frostbite on a Warden then is very arguably it is as good as Onsol's, I think. I think it would come out maybe even almost as good, assuming you're not interrupting people. If you're interrupting people, Onsol's is going to come up on top. But this is a very good set to run. Is it the best? No, and it won't be, but it's very close. So if you like the idea of a Frostbite set, and this is the thing you're compromising on, you're going to lose a little bit of damage. It's not going to be a big deal. If you're compromising on everything, you're going to lose a lot of damage, okay? and this is the issue with a lot of builds out there. When people see, all right, Mel, we'll catch you later. Enjoy your trial. Thanks for dropping in. You'll see that, people will be like, oh, this is a garbage build or whatever, right? Because there are creators that will do, and everything they do will be not optimal. And when everything they do is not optimal, it ends up kind of being kind of a bad build and not one you really want to. It's fine for Overland, but Overland, you don't really need a build to begin with. So it's like, it's kind of weird, kind of in a weird place. And it tricks a lot of people into thinking that the build is good because they tell them it's amazing, right? But then you actually go in content and it doesn't work that well and you die and it's not fun. So, yeah. Your room is haunted? I'm sorry, Emmett. Okay, let me see. Good friend John says, what class? I just dropped in. John, we're almost done, man, but we're talking about making a warden, particularly a Brittleden, for one of the channel members here, man. Think there's a demon in your room or something paranormal? Lyral says, I always think, like if it's a 2k difference, then that's in the noise of my DPS in content anyways. Yeah, if it's a 2k DPS difference, most of us, our parses will vary that much anyway, so it's kind of within the noise. But if it's like, 10 different things that are like 2 to 5k a piece, well, now you're looking at, 20 to 50k damage loss, which is significant. So kind of got to pick there. But anyways, guys, I don't think we got any more questions, so we're going to call it here for today. John, I'm sorry. I know you just dropped in, man, but we're just wrapping up here. We just went through all of it. You can obviously watch the stream after the fact. It'll be up. And in the full build guide, actually doing all this will be up as soon as I can. So anyways, I appreciate all you guys watching. Thanks everybody for stopping by. We'll be running trials tomorrow, so we'll see you then, and we might do a little hell diving or something beforehand. Lyriel said, "This is fun. Are you doing this again?" Lyriel, yes, we will do it for the DK healer. And honestly, if you guys like these kind of streams, I mean, I'm always making builds. I'm happy to do them and kind of talk through stuff as I do it in the future. So, guys, if you like this, leave a like on the video here. Go ahead and hit that now, and that will the likes don't really matter so much for like promoting a video, but it helps me know that you guys like this kind of content and I should do more of it. And I'm absolutely willing to do that. Bombas says, can we expect a full build vid for this one soon? Yes, Bombas. Soon for me. Okay, man. I want to get this out for the person it was made for, which means that I need to have Ares cry, I think, so that I can parse on it, which I'm getting there. I'm grinding this as I can. The other thing is I got a Nightblade video that I got to re-record after I just messed it up. And then I got to edit that down. Hopefully I can do that for you guys tomorrow. I always say tomorrow, and it's always a couple of days. So just realize that. What else do I got? I'm working on some other stuff too, but I'll do it as soon as I can. I would think within 3 to 4 weeks for sure. If things go well, I'll do it sooner. I know a lot of people. I did that tanking video where I went through and broke down all the tanking classes. It probably the most in depth they've ever been broken down. And I told people that hey, a Sork tank is like probably is the best tank. I mean, depending on what metrics you're looking at, a Sork tank is the best tank because it could be the meta choice or is a meta choice, and it's super survivable, right? I don't have a Sork tank build on the channel that I'm aware of, or if I do, it's really old. So I need to. That's going to be on my list before this one, but I've done all the work for that. I just got to put it together and put it all in a package, and I mean that's easy, but it takes time. So I got to do that first, and then people are asking about a DK because that's also one of them, and I kind of need to do that. So I need to get on those pretty quickly. But this will be up there, man. So for sure, hopefully. I'm sorry that I wish I could get out builds more quickly. I try to do as best I can with getting them out. So what else we got here? Lyra says, I didn't like when you talked about dropping off Cliff Racer and Fetcher, etc. Keep the animals, angry face. Duly noted, Lyriel. Duly noted. Was it good, Dungeon Beast? Man, I think it's good for everything, honestly, Chicken. I mean, definitely for, Brittleden you're not really fake tanking. Tanking on a Brittleden in random normals is super easy because you got the ice staff, man. So you're basically a tank. You just need a taunt and you're good to go. Makes a lot of sense. I got to grind scribing first anyway, so no hurry. Okay, cool, man. All right. I always feel the pressure, and I'm like, man, I want to be able to put out more. I'm getting faster and faster. Another thing I'm doing to you guys, and I could probably do with this, is Bombas, is I will make the card for this before the video's done, and I'll put that on the website. So, and I've done that with all the tanking guides, all the tanking builds. There's one on the website, or there should be. Tell me if there's not, but there should be one. Because it's there. I just messed something up. But there should be one for every tanking class. Or every class rather for tanking. And it's just the card and the skills. It's not the full guide. And I'll provide some useful information. But if you just want to figure out what skills you want to run and the basic setup, you can go find the cards there. And I'll also be doing that with the DPS moving forward because it takes a while to re-record a video, but I can update the skills that I suggest pretty quickly on those cards. So, well, anyways, guys, again, a pleasure. Really fun to chat with everybody. I love doing these kind of streams. It seems like they're popular, so we'll keep doing them. But let me know by leaving a like, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. We'll be doing hard mode Dread Cell Reef Trainer, I think. So on the twins, I think tomorrow is one of the things on the list, and we'll see what else. All right, have a good night, guys. We'll see you next time.